The secret to Franklin BBQ is how we're so consistent is that we're so inconsistent in what we do.
I'm here in Austin, Texas, the home of Franklin BBQ and possibly the best brisket in the entire world. I'm sitting down with Aaron Franklin himself to talk all things barbecue and all of the great Franklin BBQ products now available to everyone in the UK and Northern Ireland via Pro Smoke Barbecue in Oxfordshire. This includes the Franklin BBQ Pit, which until recently had a wait list of almost 2 years. There is no more wait list for the Franklin BBQ pits?
Yeah, there's really not. We had, a bazillion people on there, and, of course, everybody signs up. It's like, and then the pandemic happened and all these things. So, yeah, we've sold a lot of cookers, but the wait list is officially over. You can totally get one in a couple weeks if you order online.
So you go online and you just order. You don't need to get in a queue. And then are they made to order?
I love that you said queue.
I know the line.
It's such a thing.
I know.
Yeah, you don't have to wait. Just go on the website. You can order the cooker, essentially order it, and we'll give you a call. You fill out a little form, and then a whole bunch of communications happen, and we figure out the freight and all the stuff and what else you need, and it's pretty personalized. So I mean, you could have a cooker in a week or two.
Yeah. So when you were designing the pit, so it's not like the sauces, the rubs, that kind of thing. You can tinker pretty easily. Make a quick batch of sauce, adjust it. When you're making the pits, you design it, you build it, you fabricate it, and if it's not quite right,
you have to do all that again.
You can't just tinker. So how
Well, but see, that's the cool part about being a welder or having your own shop, is that you can actually tinker. Like, you can build some stuff, like, I think this firebox is, should be about this, so maybe you cut it a little long, and then you trim some off, and you put a new backplate on it. And then you kind of, work into where you want to be. Or the smokestacks, for example, I always cut them long, and then I cut a little off at a time until I get the right draft. Because there is no real formula for that stuff. You can't just build it. Well, you sort of can, but you can get pretty close on paper, but you can't really fine-tune it without cooking on it.
How many iterations, I mean, aside from the tinkering, lowering the stack, that kind of thing, how many usable pits did you get through before you got to the one where you were like, right, this is the one for production?
Oh, I think maybe 30-ish, 30 or 40 would be a pretty safe assumption. There are a lot, and really, it came, the design got there pretty quickly. I've been building cookers for quite a while now, cooking on a lot of them, and I have a pretty good idea of how they should be designed. I'm very stubborn in that way, but really just kind of build it out and like, this isn't quite right, but the thing that really took a long time was figuring out the airflow from the door, and of course there's no dampers on the thing. It's kind of like, don't want to give somebody a crutch to make bad barbecue in any way. And I'm trying to really force people into learning how to work your fire and all that kind of stuff. But that was the tricky part about that back door, was getting the the vent holes figured out just right, and the size of the font to regulate the amount of air that the smokestack pulls naturally. And man, I think we probably went through 20 different doors.
I've definitely seen various different versions.
There's a bunch of them.
There was the latch thing where you could, I suppose
that was a really silly idea.
Was it?
That was on the first maybe 2 or 3.
Right, and obviously you've been building 500 gallons, 1,000-gallon pits for a long time. How do you and I'm assuming to some extent you're kind of happy with how to build a 1,000-gallon pit and how they
so the tricky thing about a 1,000-gallon pit is they're all different. You could never get a 1,000-gallon pit to cook like another 1,000-gallon pit because of the different manufacturers, the thickness of the tanks, the diameters of the tanks, how the heads are welded, how they're pressed, all that kind of stuff, where the seam is, how it springs out, and all that stuff. So you get a huge variable in those tanks. But what we were able to get rid of are the variables in the small cookers, because we cut everything flat, we roll them because pipes are out around and all that kind of stuff. But so I'm not entirely happy on 1,000-gallon pits. I could build a darn good one, but I can't build 2 that are absolutely identical.
Of course. How did you go from cooking at Franklin BBQ? What kind of characteristics of cooking on a big pit did you want to kind of transfer to the backyard pit?
Really the most important thing for me is just a massive amount of airflow and to be able to turn on a dime. That's, again, why there's no dampers, because I don't want a slow cooker that's just chugs along at 200 and whatever degrees. If you're in the middle of a cook and you need to pop the heat up real quick, you need to be able to do it. Just pick up a piece of wood, it's hot. bring it back down. So to have that kind of control over it is really important, but have the massive amounts of airflow, because you can't get a good bark on a brisket without airflow. That's kind of the problem with, green eggs or Weber Smoky Mountains or, pellet cookers, is they don't have a natural convection. They don't let the moisture escape. So when you have, well-designed cooker, you can bring in air, you give your fire plenty of air that it needs for clean combustion, all that stuff, get the cleaner flavors, but then you introduce moisture because you're evaporating so much moisture out of the meat, but you have to have a balance to that climate inside there. So really, the massive amounts of airflow are really kind of what make a good brisket in a lot of ways.
It's just an easy pit to run.
They hum right along at 275.
Yeah,
it's
do.
Awesome.
Yeah, no, they definitely turn out a good looking brisket for sure. And obviously you got the book coming out, new book.
Oh yeah, there's that.
Yeah. How does that book differ from, say, the first?
Well, so it's kind of the third in the trilogy. I don't think the publisher ever knew that there was meant to be a trilogy, but I kind of think there was. So they went along with it. It's cool. So it's called Franklin Smoke, and really this book is more in line with like a home cook.
Yeah.
So it has a lot of Franklin BBQ pits in there. It has a lot of PK grills in there. Has a lot of, like home-sized cookery going on. That a lot of those recipes came up through the pandemic, just actually having a little bit of downtime to finally go home and cook. And for the first time in, gosh, I mean, maybe 10, 11, 12 years, actually being stuck at home and firing up the grill and firing up the barbecue pit. It was probably about the first time in a real long time that I was actually a little bit excited to cook barbecue.
Yeah.
I'm pretty tired of this stuff. Like, I'm around it all the time, But to go home and be like, oh, man, this is the best cooker I've ever cooked on.
Yeah.
And then swap it out with another Franklin pit and be like, no, this is the best cooker, and just getting really excited. But coming up with all these recipes and stuff. And it was really cool because I haven't gotten a chance to cook in small scale in a real long time. It's usually 100 briskets or 72 racks of ribs or something like that. But to just sit there with one piece of meat and just kind of sit in the backyard, and it was really fun. So the book kind of reflects a lot of that, but it's also kind of an update because the other book, the first one, was written almost 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So a lot of things have happened. So what I said in that book was totally what was happening then, but of course things always change. So now we sprinkle a little bit of this in there, drizzle a little bit of this on there, wrap this a little bit differently than we used to. I mean, things have changed a lot in 10 years. So the new book kind of reflects that. And, for example, the first book had an 11-page brisket recipe, and I think this new one has a 27-page brisket recipe.
Oh, so you're going to go back into brisket?
Totally redo brisket.
Awesome.
And it's more of a stream of consciousness anyway.
Yeah.
But it's kind of more like how to troubleshoot things, and I've just learned so much over the last 10 years.
Yeah.
The new book reflects a lot of that stuff.
Yeah. I know you've said it before, like, even you're still learning. I think that's a good.
That's the beauty of barbecue. Yeah. You're always figuring something out.
That's it. So when there are people out there that I think know it all, and even Aaron Franklin is still learning.
Well, the thing is, if you think you know it, you clearly don't.
Yeah, for sure. The least you know about a subject, the more confident you are. I can't remember what that more like.
Yeah, it's totally true though. Yeah. I mean, it's like anything. It's like wine, brewing beer, cooking food.
Yeah. No, I look forward to reading it for sure.
Yeah, so I think it's really cool that you've got the first Franklin BBQ pit in the UK.
I do.
Tell me about it. How do things work over there?
Yeah, so I've cooked on a lot of offsets, all the way from my first eBay $100 pit to Oklahoma.
Yeah, which is probably about the same thing I started off on too.
Yeah,
It's like a little $99 thing from the hardware store.
Yeah, so I got it, and it was just nice to not have to and just keep blowing it. And I remember that my fire in there was probably this big.
Yeah, it doesn't take much.
No. I was pretty confident cooking on an offset, that kind of size. But that was the first time where I'd experienced draw.
And I think that might be tricky for a lot of people, because there's a lot of the feedback I hear is like, oh, it's just too hot. It's too, it just gets crazy hot and then it takes. And I think that's because people are so used to building bigger fires in other cookers, just building ragers. And it's like, really, like, if you keep that stuff in scale, use really small pieces of wood, like, it doesn't take much. The thing is so efficient.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. Like, typically I used to build a fire that was big enough or small enough to get the dial to where I wanted it to be, and then let that kind of burn down. But you kind of once with the good draw of the Franklin BBQ pits, it just kind of does its thing. It's almost like it feeds itself because of that draw.
Yeah, it really does,
and it just kind of takes care of itself. So that was like a bit of a turning point for me. I mean, I've been cooking barbecue on offset since 2014, and it was really only in the last couple of years that I kind of appreciated the draw.
I guess that's the draw.
That is the draw. A lot of people, when people ask, like, probably going off the script of this, but
it's fine.
A lot of people ask, how did I get into cooking barbecue, and why offsets? Because a lot of people in the UK, they've got pellet grills. They're easy. It's an easy entry.
Well, the cool thing about a pellet grill is you get to go to sleep.
That is true.
That is pretty dang cool.
I think I went to somewhere like TGI Fridays, and I've always been a big fan of like Americana and just American food and that kind of stuff, and I love to cook anyway. And I had some ribs somewhere, and I was like, I'd like to cook some ribs.
I think I could do this.
Went on, found the barbecue Franklin videos, and I was like,
man, they let anybody on the internet.
Yeah. And I was like, I need to get a smoker. And I was like, I was looking at yours, and I'm sure you mentioned offset, so I was like, offset smoker, and I had no idea that a Traeger existed. I didn't know what.
Well, it's such a weird world out there, and half that stuff I don't even know about because I'm like keep the blinders on pretty hardcore, But yeah, it's. I can only imagine. I mean, like I don't know a lot about that stuff, and I live in the middle of Texas, where a lot of this stuff kind of originated that people are into now. But yeah, I can imagine just like the light bulbs going off, like, oh my God, what's this? Oh, what's this? And also, in contrast, when I started cooking barbecue, there was really no internet. I mean, we still had like huge, like Zach Morris phones and stuff. There was no like online research to be had anywhere. It's like you just had to drive around and figure it out. Which is partially how I landed on all this. And it's like, well, this doesn't exist. I'm just gonna make. I've got an idea.
Why everyone wants to know what the Franklin brisket secret is. Like that's the big thing.
It's love.
It is. That's what Matt in the pit room said. I said, what you guys kind of? What's the brisket process? And he said, salt, pepper, and love. And that's it.
We dabble a bit. We're always experimenting, and I think that's kind of the secret is that we're never locked into any one thing. We cook about 106-ish briskets every day, 6 days a week. And really, our process changes so much, and our process could change mid-cook. Like, it's not even like an idea. It's like, oh, let's try this. It's like the weather changes, something happens, like, let's try this. But the more you cook stuff, the bigger bag of tricks you develop. Just like kind of like always collecting data. It's like, oh man, this happened to me once when I was cooking in this country with this weird meat, blah blah blah. I know how to handle this. Because you encounter different things or different challenges, and then at least me, like I kind of go back and think about stuff after the fact. Like, man, I could have done that better. Oh, that would have been a good idea. And I'll just kind of throw it back in the old memory bank. So then later on I can access it and be like, oh, so I think the secret to Franklin Barbecue is how we're so consistent is that we're so inconsistent in what we do. Like we have like the bullet points, like, oh, we want to wrap about this time. Well, we want the briskets to look about like this by this time. But our temperatures fluctuate probably 50 degrees on our cook. Like our cooking temps. And then you got to let the brisket tell you what to do. There's really no like hard and dry way to do it. But that being said, we're always trying to make things better. So if something's a little dry, maybe we'll zhuzh it up with a little bit of this, a little bit of that. If something seems a little off, maybe because briskets like beef tastes different, even though we've got super dialed in genetics, feed, all that stuff. But every animal's different, just like people. So sometimes you get something, or you get, a batch that came from a farm that maybe didn't have as good a grass, or maybe it was hot, maybe it was rainy, and that changes the meat. So we actually change our seasonings to kind of try to offset some of that stuff a little bit too. So we're always doing stuff.
Everyone wants a temperature, a time, a
That's the thing.
Point.
Everybody wants like a black and white way to do it, and it just doesn't exist.
No.
Like it. Like the foundation is like salt, pepper, meat, and fire. And then whatever else you add into it could either make it way better or make it way worse. It's choose your own adventure.
And I guess it's difficult because you're, when you're writing it down on paper, putting it on the internet, making YouTube videos, regardless of who you are, people just think,
like, oh, that's what it is.
That's how they do it.
And they also think it's locked in. But
forever.
You also, and I realized this recently, like whenever somebody writes something, or puts something online, that's what's happening then. Like people, when you watch something 5 years later, a year later, that might not still be the case.
Yeah.
Like things just move so quickly.
Yeah.
Kind of for everybody, and I recently realized that, so it's hot on the mind. Well, man, thanks for hanging out. Cheers with our Sunday morning sparkling waters.
And that's definitely not vodka.
It's not.
No.
It's a little Jenny though.